Okay with you, Karena?
Perfect. I think we'll get started.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to our first not-for-profit discussion group for the year. Please note that this session will be recorded. So if you have an issue with that, do let us know. So our first topic today is a very, very pertinent topic, a very relevant one at the moment, and it's about the office needs you. We are lucky to have been able to have Karena as our presenter today. Karena is a partner at Coutts Lawyers and Conveyancing. She is the head of the injury compensation and employment law teams. She's passionate and dedicated to helping her clients understand their rights and obligations and advising them on the best course of action to achieve their desired outcomes. It is her practical and client-oriented approach that has contributed to her authentic reputation, positioning her as a highly regarded compensation and employment lawyer. Karena has 20 years of experience in insurance law. She has worked for international top-tier firms and gained invaluable knowledge and skills. Her broad brush of skills has allowed her to develop a diverse practice that covers all facets of injury compensation and employment laws. Over to you, Karena.
Thank you. And thank you so much for welcoming me to such an inspiring topic. I think it's a very hot topic at the moment in terms of we've all been through a lot in the last 2 years, myself included. I run a business here with another business partner, Adriana Care. We have approximately 50 staff, so definitely understand how difficult it can be. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about where I'm at. As was previously advised, we're a fairly large firm. We've been around for a bit of time now. There's 8 offices that we have. We're lucky enough to be nominated in a series of awards and received a series of awards in terms of our dedication to the law. Just a little bit about myself. I was actually born in Camden, which is part of the Macarthur area. I am a partner here at Coutts, and as previously advised, I've got 20 years experience in the law, and every day is a new day is how I look at it. And particularly moving through COVID, we saw some vast changes and fast-paced changes as they came through that really affected a lot of my business clients who are employers and how they would navigate that. And now we're on the back end of it. I thought it was a little bit pressing in terms of how we all get back to the office. And you'll see behind me, I'm actually in the office. So I definitely have moved back into the office space and quite enjoying that. So what has happened? I mean, COVID-19 has brought about major change. The traditional workspace is behind us. The new future of what a workspace will look like will be different for each business. Now, there's a lot of theory around working from home, and previously, prior to COVID-19, there was a lot of theory around, well, I'm not going to let my employees work from home because, you know, they're not going to work as hard, they're not going to do the time, and they're not going to do the hours, and it will affect the bottom line. What's funny about it is that the shift caused by COVID on a mandatory perspective actually has opened new doors, and I like to say windows, in relation to how we're going to navigate going forward. Prior to the pandemic, we saw around 30% worked at least partly from home, so that might be part-time or on a full-time basis. And a poll that was done by a researcher has indicated that it's now up to about 48% of employees will work from home, or at least in part moving to the future. So what has happened? There are some things that need to be considered from a commercial perspective. So if you're an employer, you might be looking at things like the commercial cost-cutting. You might be looking at performance increase from home. So people are working more, but getting paid for less because they're doing a lot more from home, which is actually the flip of what people thought would happen. The less need for staff to all be in the office at the same time. a reduction for the need of large commercial premises, which will be a big one coming out of the city. There's already been a lot of talk of some major players in the city downsizing their commercial spaces because they all have realised they all don't need to be there at the same time. And also from a work health and safety perspective, in terms of putting people in the same space from social distancing. But what we need to look at and consider is the long-term effects on employees. So what may seem like a great position to work from home, we may start to show cracks and then craters as time goes on. So how do you get your team to adjust? Well, it's difficult, very difficult in fact, because what we know now we're quite comfortable with for some. There's been a massive increase in mental health workers' compensation and TPD claims in the last 2 years. Work from home has now blurred the lines between what is your private time and what is your work time. I always remember I was looking into someone's house through Zoom, which always was quite strange to me because I could see, you know, the cat across the bench, or I could see people behind, you could hear children. It was a very interesting sort of entry into someone's private life, which a lot of people may not have realised at the time. It was actually blurring the lines significantly. So if we consider all these things, working from home, is it something that you should do for yourself personally? We can shine a light on what we should be looking at because it's not always better to work from home. So I thought I'd put a little bit of information in there. I liked the idea of working from home. I liked that I could put the slow cooker on when our kids were home. It meant that I was home. I could do a couple of jobs while I was at home. I could put the washing on. I could do lots of things. But what happened is that meant I worked more later into the night, weekends, and then I had no boundary. So what's happened is the boundaries need to be reset. We also saw that because we couldn't move around freely as such, except for essentials, we were working much more because there was nothing else to do. So there was lots of things that I saw in my business and my team actually doing, which were fantastic for the business. But then I started to see the cracks, which meant they were not having any boundaries and just working all the time. Burnout is inevitable if we don't change the way we interact and move forward at work moving forward. The challenge will be to see the benefits of going into the office outweigh the cons. Being in the office has some things that you may not have thought about in terms of why. So being seen in the office, this can lead to a promotion, recognition and understanding. You miss a lot when you are behind the screen. Building the boundary back and working more hours because you can is not good for you, it's not good for your family or maybe your pet because they're going to miss you a lot now that you're back in the office. Collaboration and teamwork, you can't get that through a screen. I know we've all tried, we've had team meetings, we've had Zooms, we've had everything. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult to be creative when we are behind a screen. It's hard to bounce ideas. We're working on a time frame for a team meeting, which is through a Zoom meeting. We back-to-back Zoom meet because it's easier. So we can say, oh, time's up. And we just put as much as we can into it at the time that we have. Leadership is very difficult behind a screen, and so is mentoring. Explore the meaning and validation you get when you catch up in the lunchroom. Or when you make a coffee, you check in on your staff. You ask them, how was your day? How was your weekend? You don't organise a Zoom meeting to do that. All the interactions that cease if you work from home. Humans thrive in a connected world. Things to consider, we continue. Adjustment to change can be a challenge, so you need to ease back in. Create a place where the culture and the reasons why work from home is not a good idea for your team. Guide the employees to understand that work from home is great, I am sure. Less commute, more time to work. But is that what is good for you? The time that we take to commute for some, and even myself, is a place of solitude. You can listen to music, you can listen to a podcast, you can downtime yourself when you're in the commute. You don't even realize that you're doing it, but now you won't have it anymore. You can't do that if your laptop is on the kitchen table and you're trying to, cook your dinner and also be working at the same time. You're not getting any downtime. Forbes in 2021 said that too much work from home can be bad for your career. So social isolation leading to depression and anxiety or a deterioration of relationships. Your network is your capital. So those relationships are the deposits to your career. If you lose your network, then you lose the opportunity to build your career. Learning and stimulation, going to the office gives you more stimulation and variety in your day. Overhearing a conversation about a supply issue or a problem is something that you won't get from work from home. These things you can only hear in the office, face-to-face, body language. You can't get that through a Zoom. And I can tell you in my industry, I found it very difficult dealing with some clients because I really need to see what their body language is because it tells me a lot about how they're going to present in court. Visibility, so making sure that you can be seen. If you're behind a screen in a Teams meeting, then the owners or the managers or anyone that you won't be able to be seen. And boundaries. What are your boundaries? What do they look like? The purpose and feeling the buzz of going to work, catching up, someone, baking cookies or muffins, those sorts of things you can't get from home. It's all about connection. So why? I can tell you, it's culture. Teams can be siloed because you'll have team meetings just with the teams and therefore your overall big picture business is no longer a team anymore. New employee challenges. Imagine coming in and being a new employee, trying to work out who's who, not having any opportunity to have some day-to-day conversations about just irrelevant things. Work buddies, so people who work really well together or go and have a coffee together or have lunch together, can hinder trust and connection. So how do you learn to trust someone if you've never seen them in person? Enthusiasm and motivation can be hindered. One of the biggest problems we have is that enthusiasm is driven by team. So if your team's excited, then generally most people will get on board. An effective work from home policy. Are you now available 24/7? That's a question that you need to ask yourself. If you put yourself out there that you work from home, well, if you've adjusted your hours to what suits you to drop off the kids and do this and do that, does that mean now that you're available on Sunday afternoon? Work from home doesn't always work for all employees. I can tell you here at Coutts, we had a situation where we were forced to work from home. We were an essential worker, so we tried to enforce work from home opportunities and manage it well. But simply, some people didn't have the right technology or internet available to actually be able to work from home. Some people found it very isolating and challenging to work from home. So you're going to have to look at how your team works and whether or not that's something that it works for all employees or if you're going to personalize it for each. So I think I might just ask if there's any questions yet, because I can talk really fast and then just keep going.
I don't have any question in the chat box at the moment, but if anyone wants to ask a question, I think they can feel free to ask one. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Silence. I guess we can move on.
That's okay. That's good. All right. So personal preference. I read some documentation about personal preference and what that looks like. The pandemic, there's been a lot of discussion around, will it be the death of the office, as some suggest? I don't think so. The future structure may be more of a personal preference or a PP, maybe a structured hybrid. However, for most jobs, it is not a long-term solution. One option is to have allocated time slots for working collaboratively and productively, while some work from home if it works for the industry. So for example, you might have some seniors that really need that solitude time in order to get the work out. That may be an opportunity for you to allow work from home. Or you might have some juniors who really need that senior in the office more so they can be mentored. So that may negate that, because you really need to make sure that the people underneath that senior are working to their best ability to be able to support the senior. A Harvard Business School stated, remote working will be part of our lives. Excuse me, we need to solve the problem of maintaining culture. So what that's telling us is that remote working may work, but it won't work for everybody. And what it will do is affect culture. As time goes on and on, we'll see a decline in the way that humans interact with each other in the workplace. This cannot be good for anybody, because as we know, I will talk about the Great Reshuffle or the Great Resignation and what that looks like. So remember, no one sees how early you show up to your screen. They don't see how hard you're working. How can you be creative through a screen? The plan is to integrate into the office. It is not sustainable or desirable for most employees. What are your employees saying about return to work? One way to find out is to issue a survey to find out how they're feeling. Maybe they're anxious about returning to work. It's not uncommon. Maybe they're not sure how it would work for them now and their families. Maybe their values have changed. These are all things that you can ask your employees through an anonymous survey. It will give you an idea of where you sit in terms of work from home. The Great Reshuffle, as I like to call it, rather than the Great Resignation, as known in the US, has solidified that people are changing what they know and how they live. If you understand the value of the person, you may be able to hold on to them. I recently attended a seminar run by a very inspiring coach leader, Kim Payne. She was motivated by the fact that most people don't understand what their values or their virtues are. One thing that I took from that was, if you can understand the value of an employee, you may be able to understand where they're coming from rather than just having a hard and fast answer for everything. So what you could do is understand what the employee needs. What do they want to get out of their workforce? What are their goals and aspirations? Now, we do most industries, a performance review, and it's normally once a year. Employers are now going to have to step that up. I don't think once a year is going to be enough. We're going to have to understand what an employee needs. Their value may be lifestyle. So even though my generation in particular was all about hard work and doing more and more to succeed, it's not necessarily what the generation wants anymore. If that is the case, if people value lifestyle or some kind of, I call, it's not really something lifestyle balance, because there's never lifestyle balance, there's always something that gets sacrificed. You need to understand what that looks like. Something that you should be fighting for is skill and qualification. So if you've got a really fantastic employee who really does an exceptional job for your business, or you are that person, you need to understand your value and what it is you need in order to maintain that on an ongoing basis. A structured hybrid could include something for those who commute to travel outside peak times. So rather than work from home, it may very well be that instead of hitting the M5 and sitting there for 2 hours, they can start a bit later or start really early, so that then they can get their work done and not feel that they've lost that time in commute. Equipment and safety is one big issue that needs to be considered. Depending on the industry that you work in, a lot of industries failed when we went to work from home to ensure that employees had the right equipment. This then resulted in workers' compensation claims that rose over that period of time when they suffered injury in their own homes during the course of employment. So what you need to do is, if you were going to have a work from home, you need to make sure that it's ergonomically set up. You need to make sure that there is no hazards. And this can be very challenging because you don't control the environment. Safety is another one. When we look at COVID-19, we need to look at what that looks like. Many people are afraid to come back out into community. We see now a rise in numbers. A rise in numbers, every other person has COVID, is definitely something that's on the radar. Vaccination is an issue. It continues to be an issue in the workplace. What about when people don't get their boosters? That's also going to be an issue. Without the booster, what we will see is an increase in numbers again, which then could put strain on the medical department, which then could result in further mandates. So what you need to understand is you need to make sure you have a policy in place. What does your business require? What will you accept and what will you not? It's not a hard and fast answer for everybody, but it's definitely something you need to think about. Work health and safety also considers if you contract COVID in the workplace, then you are liable under workers' compensation. What that means is that if your employee or you as an employer contract it and you're off work because of it, essentially you could claim workers' compensation. This became a very live issue in America here in Australia, when a man was traveling in America and contracted COVID. It was in the early part, so I think it was the end of 2019, early 2020, prior to any mandate as to vaccinations. What happened was he was traveling on a plane to the US for work. He contracted it, ended up in an American hospital, which clearly Medicare doesn't cover, and then ended up racking up over $1 million in medical expenses because he was then placed on life support. Unfortunately, this man passed away. His family then brought a death benefit claim under workers' compensation, which under the scale is worth around just shy of $900,000. They claimed that he contracted the disease during the course of his employment. iCare then disputed it and said we could not be sure where he contracted it and whether or not he did actually contract it during the course of his employment. What ended up happening was that the case was determined in favour of the family. The iCare insurer had to pay out over $1 million in costs plus the death benefit as per the scale. This scared employers. So what happened was they decided that they were going to either mandate vaccination or they were going to ensure that they protected their employees as much as they could to not contract it within the workplace. These are all things you need to remember if you're returning to the office, because if your employee contracts it in the course of their employment, you will be liable. Also, what we need to think about is also just general health and well-being, making sure we have masks if they're applicable, make sure that we have cleaning processes in place. I've never seen so much cleaning happening in all the places that I've been and didn't realize it was happening. Who knew they didn't actually wipe down aeroplanes or trolleys? I didn't know that. I assumed that's what was happening. So now I'm very conscious about making sure that I put myself in a position of safety. So you will need to do that as an employer, as to encourage your staff back to the office. Structure it if you want to, but make sure you structure it in policy and procedure. Make sure it's very clear what your company, or you understand as an employee, what your company expects of you, what is required, what does the role need. But getting staff back to work will improve business culture and structure. So then we get to the legal part of it, which is where I obviously sit most days, is in terms of contracts. Many employees will be on an employment contract or covered under an award. It's unlikely that they have a work from home clause because it just wasn't done. Some people might have worked part-time. There might have been a verbal negotiation around on this day you could work from home, or you could negotiate that part. But now we're seeing that we're going to have to formalise what that looks like. That means now all employees, because there is no mandate, can and should return to the office as per their contract. Now, what may happen out of that, though, is that if you enforce that an employee must return to work, they may see that as a negative and that you don't value them or what they have contributed over the last 2 years. You need to be very careful about just mandating across the whole office what that looks like. Have consultations with your employees if they have raised a concern about flexibility, working from home, and what that might look like for the business. I would also recommend that when you're talking to them, you raise some of the points that I've raised previously around it's about protecting them, ensuring that they have a boundary, understanding that that's not necessarily good health for them if they're constantly working or trying to work around, other things rather than just coming into their role and getting the day done. You also need to explain to them about culture. If they're a leader or a senior, it's very important that they lead by example. It's very important that they set the boundaries and show others that they can do it, therefore they can do it. One thing I have seen is this, will I get more work done from home? We all get more work done from home. That's just common knowledge for most. But what you need to understand is that you get more work done at home, but at what cost? What cost is it costing you to do that? Do you feel guilty if you're not logged on? You've always got your phone turned on, checking your emails. It's just a constant. Even on weekends, you worry about what Monday looks like, so you look at all your things on Sunday so you can try and clear it out before the day even starts. Therefore, you're working 6 days a week. Is that really what you want your employees to be doing? The obligations, as I said before, remain. Work health and safety laws have not changed. So you need to consider cleaning, face masks, vaccination, and other parts of your return to work plan and provide a safe environment. Your obligation as an employer or as an employee is to provide a safe place away from hazards. If you contract COVID in the workplace, that is a hazard. Working from home is not something that you would think, working from home is something that we all would think is beneficial, but make it the exception, not the norm. Any questions?
We do have one question from Michelle, and her question is, so from a work health and safety perspective, how do we ensure that staff have correct equipment set up and a safe working area when working from home? What are the obligations for the employer, and to ensure that they minimize potential workers' compensation claims? And also, what can employers do to ensure that their employees have clear boundaries over their work hours to minimize the potential of mental health issues or burnout?
Great question. So there are some things you can do. Create a checklist. The checklist should set out all of the equipment that they have and all of the equipment that they need. I suggest that you get them to take photographs of their setup so you can ensure that ergonomically it's okay. What one person may think is okay might not be okay for another. And what that may mean is that, sitting at a dining table with a dining chair that is not ergonomical is not going to be helpful at all. So you'll end up with some kind of back or neck injury, and then they will be claiming workers' comp. So that's one way you can try and visually see it. If they feel uncomfortable about taking photos, and some people do, then I would get them to sign off on the checklist, that they've ensured that the following is covered, that their desk height is a certain height, that they have a chair that is ergonomical in terms of what is expected. You could provide a chair if you think that that's more beneficial, making sure they have the right equipment in terms of, do they need 2 screens or 1 screen, or, do they have a phone? Then what you can do is, the people who don't work within the boundaries. Now, for our industry, we time record, so I can see who is working above and beyond their hours. I don't know if that's the same for all other industries, One way to do it is that if your employee is sending you emails outside of the work hours, you need to pull them up about it. You need to have a very frank conversation about it. And there may be a reason. It may be that they had to go and pick up their child from school that day and they didn't get to it until 6 o'clock that night. If you accept that, then that's fine. But if they are caring for small children whilst they are at home and working, you're exposing potentially yourself to a claim. If that child injures themselves because that parent or carer is engaged in a Zoom conference, then you have a big problem, because essentially you're putting your employee in a situation where they are actually not able to care for their child because they're engaged in something else. Other things to think about is that my employee is not suffering from mental health. It's very difficult to do that through a screen. That's why we do not recommend work from home. Is my internet still okay? Yes?
Yes, it's fine. I can hear you. Yeah.
I just got a thing saying it was unstable. So working from home mental health wise, it's very difficult to check in with someone on the phone. I always recommend, if you have to check in, it is via Zoom or Teams so you can see the person. Essentially, it's even better if you can get them to come into the office. If you can get them to come into the office and you're just doing a health check. It's not, is everything traveling okay? Is workload okay? Are you managing, is there anything else we can resource? And make sure you keep really detailed notes about that. The biggest thing you'll see is that an employee will say, they never checked on me. They never cared what I was doing. I was wiltering away and no one knew I was even there. We see that a lot. So if you have notes there that says, I had a Zoom with the person, I asked them the questions about how are you and what's happening. If they don't share that, then you should be able to see it sometimes anyway in body language. That's why I prefer it in person. But also if they turn up to the meeting in their pajamas, no makeup or hair done that they would normally do, then that's a red flag for me. Being very aware of their environment is very important. You don't know if that person has other issues such as domestic violence. There could be concerns with family members. There could be tech issues where they're trying to get work done and they simply can't. You've got to be really in touch with those people that work from home. Any other questions?
No, that's the only question so far, but I do have a question. What happens in situations where, I don't know, there are two parents working from home and there's only one resource and they have to share that resource? So let's say a computer, a laptop. How does it fall under, compensation if something happens? And
Yeah. So ideally, if you're going to be working from home or allowing your employees to work from home, you should be providing equipment. Because without equipment, you actually could be exposing yourself to other things such as breach of confidentiality or privacy. That's another issue. You also need to be aware of that they could be saving things onto their normal personal hard drives if they own it. So there could be an IP issue. And I'm not saying that's what people are doing. What people tend to do is they try and navigate between sharing one resource, like you said, to get two jobs done. And then one ends up working till midnight and the other one's, looking after the child, and then the other. I think we're past that now. Considering we're outside of the mandate of working from home, it should very well be that if someone wants to work from home, the other partner should either be back at work or they should be asking their employer to provide some kind of resource, or it could even be if the company can't afford to provide the resource, it might be salary sacrifice. It could be something that's there in order to support the person to be able to purchase a new laptop or equipment that they need.
Thank you, Karena.
That's okay. I don't have too much more. So where am I up to? Yeah. So with contracts, what people tend to do is they form a contract and they start and it's all exciting. And then no one ever revisits the contract, which I find just bizarre. So we end up 10 years later and that role has developed or changed or is no longer, or we've implemented policy and procedure that is now different, or they've taken on a more senior role where there needs to be restraint clauses or IP protection, and it really hasn't been considered. At any point when the person's role changes, you should be re-looking at their contract to see whether or not a new one needs to be issued. If you are moving towards a work from home, then I strongly suggest that you put that into their contracts. And it may just be a clause that says the person works from home on whatever day, structure it out. And then it's always open for negotiation between employer and employee. Say, for instance, on that particular day, you know, you wanted to swap it because you needed to go to the kids' Easter hat parade or whatever it may be. You should be able to do that anyway, because you were doing that when you're in the office. Even when your contract was full-time, you still had an ability to communicate. Well, most good employers would, you know, offer a sense of value and understanding that there is a life beyond work, to be able to incorporate their life into their work life, because it's a give and take situation. If you've got employees that take all the time though, then that may be something that you don't want to offer. Maybe it's work from home on a trial basis. You don't have to lock in. You could simply say that we'll give it a go for 6 months or 3 months and see how it goes. If it's not working for the business, then it's not working, because it's not personal. It's about what's good for the business and how the business operates and whether or not it's sustainable going forward. If it's one day here or one day there, you've got to be very careful about who's off on what days, because what if that team needs to collaborate? Or what if that team member needs to go to that other team member and they actually never meet again face to face because their hours have been changed? So reviewing contracts is really important. Aside from that is policy. So companies have policy and we all love policy. Policy is just, you know, there's a phone policy, there's a, you know, everything that you could possibly think of, there's a policy. There should be a work from home policy. What that looks like will depend on your type of industry and your business. And they're things that Coutts can help you with, or any firm can help you with, in terms of developing good policy. What that means is that it's very clear as to what the arrangement is. And that's where relationships fall apart between employer and employee, and we end up in the Fair Work Commission because the communication is lacked. You need to be very open, transparent. You need to be able to consultate with people and understand what their position is. Then you can formulate a contract or a policy. They're the keys to making sure that as you go forward, you'll be able to get people back in the office. You'll be able to make sure your culture is strong, because nobody wants to come to work and be miserable. People want to come to work and enjoy what they do. They know that they're good at what they do, whether it's accounting or being a lawyer or a doctor or working at a local shop. They know what they can do. You just need to be able to look at it and make sure that what's working for them is also working for the business. And that is it. So thank you for having me. I will put up my Connect with Us so you can scan that and connect with me anytime. You're welcome to ask any questions now, or if you think of questions later, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Thank you, Karena. That was a very, very interesting session, very insightful, very timely, I would say. So if anyone has any question, I guess they could just ask you. Any question, anyone?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Yeah, that's right.
What did I say? Communicate.
Okay, if no one has a question, so I might start. How would an employer deal with an employee resisting coming back to the office?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is consultation. So really having a discussion about what is the resistance, how that can be overcome, whether you can bring in a hybrid for a small period of time to encourage them back into the workplace.
Yep.
And then also making sure that at the end of the day, it's actually not up to the employee, it's up to the employer. But if you don't want to lose that employee, you're going to have to think about how you can encourage them to return back to work to what they love. Understand that they're missing out on all the things that I've mentioned, so that they can understand that it's not just a hard and fast, oh, you need to get back to the office. There are reasons why you need to get back to the office.
Yeah. We also have a question from Nina, and her question is, what do you think? So which mode of working is preferable for the employer?
I think it depends on the type of employer you have. For instance, here we're a very flexible employer. Most of our seniors are able to make decisions in relation to their dynamic, depending upon how it impacts their team. So we look at it on a team basis. And if working from home one day makes no difference at all, then that's fine. If you want to work from home 4 days and only come to the office, well, that would have a huge impact on the team. So we kind of look at it on the basis of what is right for the industry, as in the business that we have, and what works. And sometimes what you think will work actually doesn't work. So you've got to just do a bit of trial and error.
Thank you, Karena. Any more questions from anyone? No, not really.
No.
No? They might come up with questions afterwards, Sometimes they think through it and then we have questions. So we might hear from them after that.
Can I ask you?
Yes, Nina.
Where can we get more information about that? What is falling under workers' comp when people are working from home?
Yeah, so you can go to SIRA, SIRA, which is a State Insurance Regulatory Authority website. Another good way to keep on top of it is, and I don't want to, promote myself, but I do a lot of blogs and information which is free. So if you follow Coutts on Facebook or LinkedIn, so I actually did an article on that case that was through America, and you'll be able to see the case law and then be able to look at what were the elements that were considered in that case. So you can definitely find things on SIRA, or if you follow myself and my team, we try and keep up to date with anything that's coming through and then publish about it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any more questions? No? I don't know, maybe it's just lunchtime, Yeah. We might call it a day then. And thank you, Karena. Thank you very much for your time. This session has been recorded, so we're going to make the recording available after a few days. And yeah, enjoy your lunch, getting close to lunchtime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Thank you, Karena.